Hey there, welcome to the Embrace Sports Bra Sewalong, the Embrace Bra by Greensyle. I'm super excited to do this with y'all, and I figured I'd get started by showing just a few measuring tips and some things that you might want to consider when measuring yourself and when making any adjustments to your pattern before we get started. So I am wearing a Power Sports bra, also Greensyle, in a halo fabric. It's butter. This is mesh, the stretch mesh, and I put it as a second layer over, I believe, butter. It's been a minute since I've made it, but it's one of my all-time faves. I've worn it to death, and it's time that we refresh that bra collection, right? So when you choose something to wear for your measuring, you want to make sure that you consider what is happening to your chest with the garment that you're wearing. Something that you might want to do that I did in the beginning was measure myself in a lot of different bras or maybe without one in a couple positions and take the average to find what was most accurate for each bust measurement. Although the Embrace bra only has a couple measurements, there's under bust and full bust, and then we do a little math to see if the darts are most ideal for your bust shape. So I'm wearing right now something that I like the support of. It is going to be more compact than if I was not wearing anything. It's probably going to be less volume than if I was wearing a push-up bra. My nipples are going to be, the apex are going to be in a different spot than some of those other things or the other options I just mentioned. So it's something that you need to consider with how you want your bra to fit. I like my sportswear to be pretty snug. Don't like a lot of movement. I think it's just like some leftover feelings from Taekwondo and developing and feeling like my body was in my own way, and it was just, I don't like all that. I don't want it to be taped and uncomfortable, can't breathe, but somewhere in between those, okay? So I'm wearing a bra that I like the support of, that I like where my chest is and the shape of it. When designers when they draft for different measurements, they don't they're not expecting you to wear something that's already compressed. Keep that in mind. I like my stuff a little snug, so I think that I'll like the size of whatever I get from the measurements I get right now. All right, no more talking. We're gonna go under bust. We're gonna go right under the bust, making sure that it's as even as it can be in terms of being parallel with the ground. We don't want it to be like all jacked up. Make sure it's as level as we can. So use a mirror. And then I like to put my arms down as much as I can. That you'll notice it'll move. Okay. If you have your arms up, you can make it a lot tighter and it won't seem like it's very tight. As soon as your arms go down, the rib cage expands just a little bit. So keep that in mind. Looks like we're measuring right at, see how I put my arms down and relax, 33. Okay, so that's going to be my under bust measurement. Full bust, we're going to go right across the apex. That's going to be the biggest part of your chest. Now, you might not have a lot of chest, but you might have a lot of back. Something to think about. If we want that perfect fit, it might mean that you go a little down in the chest and go up in the back piece in sizes if you have larger lats. So just think about your body. Be objective as best you can and say, all right, what shape am I? When I go buy clothing at the department store, how does ready to wear fit me? Is it too big, too small? Different spots that I'm like, oh, it never fits there. This is why we sew, right? All right, so same. I'm going to go over my apex, making it as level as I can with the floor. It's just a little too loose. See that? All right, as level as we can, right them over, and then get those arms down to the sides as best as we can while measuring ourselves. We're looking at just shy of 30, or 36.75. So those are going to be my measurements. Give me a second and we're going to figure out what size I'll be cutting today. Okay, so my measurements of 33 under bust and 36.75 full bust put me into a size E. And that difference between the two is 3.75 inches, which is right on the cusp of deciding if I should use darts or not. I personally think that darts contribute to things staying even more where I want them to be. So I'm going to deal with a little bit of extra work and get a better fit and use the dart option. A couple more things that I wanted to show you that I don't think everybody considers, and I'm a shorty, 5 foot. I have still, I would say, a pretty regular sized chest. It's high though. My nipples are a little bit higher sometimes in some patterns than what is designed. So I can get the fullness down here. Doesn't fit very well, right? Or it looks droopy, or it just feels like I'm wearing my mother's clothes, right? Like I'm a little kid trying to play dress up. So some things to consider when you're looking at your printed pattern to decide if you're going to make any adjustments before making your first try. Your shoulder, high shoulder point to full bust apex point. Okay, so high shoulder point is going to be if you had if it's like an out seam. We have an out seam on our shoulders. You guys can tell it's been a minute since I've been sewing. And so we're going to decide where that would be, like where the neck meets the shoulder and if it was on that out seam. So right about here for me, and I'm going to take my measuring tape and make sure if yours has a funky wonky first part of that inch, don't use that inch, use the next one. So I'm going to hold that as best I can while also keeping my elbow down. We're going to try and keep the chest to be where it more is typical as it is, okay? So where it most often is, that's what we're hoping to find. So we're going to find our apex. Sometimes I mark it with tape. If I'm trying to measure 1-to-1 and I'm not videotaping myself, it's easier to look in the mirror and use a little bit of tape. So I'm just going to take it along the natural part here and then find that spot. So for me, it's going to be 9 1/4 inches. Now, if you measure your pattern, you might say, well, it's already shorter than this, much shorter. I need to add length. Not so fast. We are making snug fit stretch garments. So they are going to stretch to fit. That's why when you look at your fabric requirements, it says it has to have vertical stretch. Vertical stretch, okay? So it still is going to be, the pattern is going to be shorter than whatever it is that you measure. And if it's not, then that is going to be an adjustment you need to make because you would be a lot shorter, okay? So don't make me think too hard outside of what we're doing here right now, folks. So I look at that, I'm going to take that number into account. I'm going to do the same on the back. So I'm going to start off where that high shoulder point meets, and I'm going to see about where my underbust band should be. Okay, this is another thing that you could mark with elastic first, and then you could just see, okay, there it is. I can see it in the mirror what number it is. Good to go. I personally have a little bit of an extra curvature in my lower back. This means that my whole back is shorter than the average. So let's say I take off 1 inch in the front, I might need to take off 1.5 inches in the back. Things to keep in mind, okay? I'd love if you have any questions about measuring or deciding what size to cut to let me know, and I'll help out, okay? It's definitely a trial and error process. Don't get too hard on yourself if your first make isn't absolutely perfect. You'll know what you need to do next time if you take these little adjustments first. All right, happy day one. We'll talk to you guys soon. It's time to cut. Make sure that you have all of your measurements written down. I'm not going to go over too in depth on how to cut your fabric. I just want to point out there's a few tools already in the pattern that are really helpful to make sure that you have all the pieces you need for the style you have chosen. So choose which style you're going to do. If we're going to do the split color block front, or you're just going to do the solid front, if you're going to use darts or not, the matching lining pieces, and on the back if you're going to do the U-back, the racer back, or the layered. Have all your pieces laid out and get ready to do any adjustments you might need. Those front adjustments I'll show you quickly on a piece of how I decide if I need to shorten or not. The answer is almost always yes. And you would use the same concept to decide if you needed to shorten the back. I did shorten my back, and I'm going to shorten my front as well. Okay, another tip I'll just throw in here for funsies. When I cut, sometimes athletic fabrics are a little slick and they like to move around. So as I cut along or rotary along the edge of my fabric the edge of my pattern on my fabric, I use our little sewing clips and go clip, clip, being sure that I'm not pulling or stretching any one way, but leaving it as flat and as relaxed as possible. And I'm making sure that as I trim, my pattern piece stays where I cut it. I don't know if you've ever done this where you cut all the way around and you're like, where I started is now smaller than it was supposed to be because the whole thing shifted. We're going to try to avoid that, okay? All right, happy cutting. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. It is my favorite puzzle to figure out how to make patterns fit just perfect on your body. Okay, so now we're looking at my front piece. You'll notice it does say size F. This is the last size I made, and it did feel a little large, but it's what I have cut out right now, so I'm just going to show you this so you can see what I'm talking about here. I'm going to measure just inside the shoulder because the high shoulder point isn't going to be as far over as this bra is designed. I'm going to account for the seam allowance there, so this is 1/2 inch squares, about 3/8 down, and then I'm measuring towards the apex. If we're looking here, the dart is going to give us a clue. It's going to point to the apex, and it's going to be about here, maybe a little higher there. Think about if this is the chest, we're looking at about here. And I'm looking at the lined piece just for simplicity because the front outer is cut, right, with that pretty shape there. So looking here, it's about 8.5, 8 3/4, in the 8 to 9 range. I know for me that is going to be a little long. I'm going to need to shorten this some so that it stretches to fit over my chest rather than has excess fabric because I desire that support. All right, here we go. Next one.